Hey y'all, welcome to the channel. I'm Task Force Bourbon. That's right, you guessed it. Today we're doing something special. We're going to do a blind flight fight of some from the old Rip Van Winkle lineup. We have Van Winkle, Lot B, 12-year-old, fighting against Weller, 12-year-old. Why, you might ask? Well, if you're watching this channel, you probably already know why. But for those of you who don't, like is tradition here on Task Force Bourbon, we're going to be going over a little bit of the history of Van Winkle, Weller, and why these two specifically should be paired up against one another. So we'll go ahead and dig right into that first, but talking about Pappy Van Winkle, which refers to Julian Sr. Pappy, nicknamed Pappy Van Winkle, who created the original line of Van Winkle whiskeys. Just as a fun side note, Van Winkle is a Dutch name that loosely translates to from shopkeeper. All right, so however, Pappy directly also refers to Pappy 15, 20, and 23 year, not Old Rip Van Winkle, which is a 10-year wheated bourbon, or this one. So when we say Pappy, we're talking about really Pappy as a person, and generally, writ large, the Old Rip Van Winkle lineup of bourbons, which also does include a 13-year if we're inclusive to all of their offerings, rye whiskey. All right, so with that said, we're also talking a little bit about the Pappy craze, right? Because despite the fact that this is not officially a Pappy bourbon, this is still going to get the Pappy prices, right? That Pappy craze seems to have started around 1996 when a sales rep submitted the Van Winkle 20-year to the prestigious Beverage Testing Institute, where it got a 99, the highest rating it had ever given. Then factor in that they produce around only 84,000 bottles a year. This is exaggerated by the quote angel share that evaporates most of the product as it matures. For every 3 gallons of drinkable bourbon produced, 53 must be made. Quote, here's a quote for you. Every now and again, you'll see the word empty written on a barrel, and that's just a gut punch, said Preston Van Winkle. But according to an interview with Julian III and Fortune magazine, this is a, quote, strategy of scarcity intended to build their brand. When the Wall Street Journal asked him about astronomical prices that people were paying, he just replied, quote, if they're dumb enough to pay that much, that's their prerogative. I would concur. I would say that these bourbons should nowhere be near fetching the $1,200 you'll easily see this sold for on the secondary market. I don't have the prices in front of me, but I'm pretty sure the Pappy 23 years MSRP, which is the highest, oldest offering that they offer in that old Rip Van Winkle lineup, is somewhere sells around about $350, right? That goes for anywhere between $3,500 to $6,000 on the secondary market. And these guys are right around, usually somewhere around 100, 150, somewhere around there, right? Don't quote me. But all that to say, is the craze worth the hype? I've had, obviously, you see here, this is not a fresh crack bottle, so I have had it. I will say they're good bourbons. I'm not paying in the thousands of ranges, but I digress. Let's continue on. All right, to talk about Pappy, you really need to talk about Weller, or more specifically, William LaRue Weller. We'll start first back with his family immigrated to Maryland from Germany in the 1740s, where they put down roots, purchased a large tract of land, and became farmers and millers. They later moved to the bluegrass state, Kentucky, in the mid-1790s and began distilling on their land, taking part in the early foundation of the whiskey industry that would go on to become a defining part, obviously, of whiskey or Kentucky culture. William LaRue Weller, which is where we get this name specifically from on this bottle, and the rest of the Weller lineup, was born in 1825, but we'll fast forward to 1849, where he began his career as a wholesale whiskey dealer and distiller, carrying on the legacy started by his paternal grandfather and his maternal great-grandfather. Weller first started W.L. Weller and Brothers with his youngest sibling Charles before changing the name to W.L. Weller and Sons. Weller continued to grow his whiskey business over the years. Okay, William LaRue Weller was really known for one major thing. Well, two major things. One, he really started the wheated as a secondary flavoring grain. So most bourbons, you'll have 51% or more of corn, and then your secondary grain being either rye, or technically it could be really anything, but it's typically rye, or you'll see wheat as a secondary flavoring grain. When that secondary flavoring grain is the most and is wheat, you'll nickname these bourbons wheaters, right? They're still bourbons, But that wheat, secondary flavoring grain allows for a more softer, approachable bourbon, which was his, marketing gimmick, as it were, at the time when he was selling. So to do that, in 1893, he hires Julian P. Pappy Van Winkle Sr. At the age of 18. He was a traveling salesman, think, horse cart and buggy kind of deal. And then we'll fast forward a little bit more to 1899 when William Louis Weller dies. Pappy and his co-worker Alex Farnsley purchased the company after that in 1908. Later, they also purchased out of Louisville, Kentucky in 1910, the A.P.H. Stitzel Distillery. All right, that was originally a sour mash whiskey distillery in 1872. That distillery supplied much of the whiskey that was sold by the Weller Wholesale Company firm. So going back to that company and firm, George Weller, William's oldest son, right, remained president of the company until the beginning of Prohibition, when Pappy and Farnsley decided to merge Arthur Stitzel Weller of A.P.H. Stitzel Distillery to create Stitzel Weller Distillery, which opened on Derby Day of 1935. Now, that name is something you should recognize, Stitzel Weller. That's somewhere where you can still go today, right? That's now where you'll see companies like Blade and Bow laid roots to. You'll see Bullet was there for a while. I think they're still there as well. I know they have something else open, a few miles outside of the Stitzel Weller Distillery as well. But I digress again. The consolidation coincided with Prohibition, during which time Stitzel Weller firm was licensed by the government to produce whiskey for medicinal purposes. So their prominent brands, right, that they were really known for, the Stitzel Weller Distillery, was this, Weller, right, not this in this label that we know now, but Weller, Old Fitzgerald, Rebel Yell, and Cabin Still. So up until his death in 1965, Pappy was the oldest active distiller in the nation at the age of 91. His son Julian Jr. ran operations at Stitzel Weller until stakeholders forced to sale in 1972. They sold off all of those brands and others, right? So many other brands. Julian Jr., though, he did resurrect a pre-Prohibition label called Old Rip Van Winkle, using whiskey stocks from the old distillery. We're going to kind of bounce around just a bit just to get some facts out here. But 1977, he was joined by his son Julian III, creating the firm J.P. Van Winkle & Son. After his father's death in 81, Julian III carried on Pappy's motto, which is all their motto, just so you know, it's actually written partially on my shirt here, is "We make fine bourbon at a profit if we can, at a loss if we must, but always fine bourbon." So he continues to run operations today at the Van Winkle brand at the Buffalo Trace Distillery, along with his son Preston, as of 2001. All right, so we're going to go back. Remember, I told you bounce around a little bit. So let's go back to creating that brand. Although the Van Winkles no longer owned the Stitzel Weller Distillery, they continued to use Stitzel Weller stock for the Old Rip Van Winkle brand. However, in 1992, Stitzel Weller Distillery closed, right, and stopped producing bourbon. For a while, the Van Winkles got by old stock, but with supply running low and demand increasing yearly, Julian Van Winkle III made the decision to team up with Buffalo Trace in 2002. They started using Buffalo Trace's wheat and mash bill instead, and I'll put a little asterisk next to that. We'll come back to that. Buffalo Trace had already purchased the Weller brand in 99, so the deal just made sense to combine those wheated brands together. So let's see. So since 2002, so in 2013 we got Julian Preston Van Winkle III saying that the 2013 bottlings of the 23-year brand expression, quote, may be the last of its kind, since at that point there was very little left of the aging stock from the Stitzel Weller Distillery. Although the brand is not going to be discontinued, it's just going to be using that Buffalo Trace mash bill. So they have one mash bill, right? They use one yeast, one mash bill for the wheated line, right? Anyway, so that's all of the Old Rip Van Winkle minus the 13-year rye. That distillate is barreled and racked. From there, as it ages, it is selected and batched to serve both the Weller and Van Winkle lines, right? The Van Winkle family gets to come down and pick, quote, honey barrels, right? That's the barrels they deem as representing their brand the most, the best barrels. Obviously, if you're going to pick a barrel, you're going to choose the best that they can pick from. When the age is right, because obviously you got the 10-year, the 12-year, 15, 20, 23, right? Then they get dumped and bottled at varying proofs, right? So this one, for example, is 90.4 compared to the Weller 12, which is a 90 proof bourbon. So very, very close, right? Same year, same everything, 0.4 proof difference. That's it. And then so basically you could picture, if you would, from Buffalo Trace, whenever they do a store pick, you don't see all the waxing and all kinds of crazy stickers on the back. You'll just see a small silver or gold or bronze medallion right somewhere on the label there. And you could, actually I got one right here. Let's see if I can't get this out without causing a mess. Here's a Buffalo Trace store pick. That one's actually from Harlan Wheaton, the master distiller there currently. Right? You could picture this maybe. One could argue, and I might get a little hate for this, but you could picture this as having a sticker on it that says Van Winkle family. Right? That's really not that far of a leap. Okay? There's a lot of speculation. I won't get into speculation because I try to stick to as much facts as I can, although a lot of what Buffalo Trace is undisclosed, non-age stated kind of deal. But I try to stick away from speculation, but some of that speculation does talk about, where it's aged in the rick house, but really that's all speculation. So unless you're Harlan Wheatley or the Van Winkles, you probably ain't going to really know for sure. All right, so a little bit about each one of these individually real quick. All right, so Lot B, Van Winkle Special Reserve 12-year, is from obviously that same lineup of bourbons. Julianne Van Winkle III introduced Van Winkle Special Reserve in 1991 in an effort to create an interest in older bourbons that would eventually lead to his fabled Pappy line. At the time of the 91 release, there was no such thing as Pappy, as it hadn't been released yet. The first ever Pappy wasn't launched until 1994. The first of this offering was Lot A of Special Reserve. It was small and it ran out quickly. However, Lot B, right, was much larger, and by the time those barrels ran out, everyone got used to the 12-year-old of that line being called Lot B, that the name stuck and they just kept with it to avoid confusion. Versus Weller 12, which is something, again, some people call Poor Man's Pappy, okay? But that's something different altogether. Poor Man's Pappy is actually a marriage of 2 parts, 40% Weller 12, and 3 parts, 60% Old Weller Antique. It's a red label, right? Bottle at 107. You do that, you mix them together, and you can let that sit for, as 2 seconds if you want, or option B, the better option. I've tried it, I've done it for 30 days or more. That's supposed to taste like Pappy 15, right? So Poor Man's Pappy. That's for another day, right? But this is also sometimes referred to as Poor Man's Pappy. As you can see here, maybe why. Although officially, again, this is not Pappy. This is a Van Winkle of the old Rip Van Winkle line. Okay, so when you're talking about this bourbon, moving over to the Weller 12, as I said before, they bought the Weller name brand in 1999. They introduced Weller 12 in 2001, and it was eventually joined by others, including, again, the Old Weller Antique 107 proof, Special Reserve, which is a green label, CYPB, which stands for Create Your Own Perfect Bourbon. It's a white label. And then Full Proof. There's also like the single barrel. It's an orange. Full Proof's the blue, Full Proof. And then obviously those are behind the other premium wheaters from that distillery, including the Pappy, including William LaRue Weller, which is of the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. Very premium, very rare, very expensive type kind of offerings. Just a little about both of the wheated bourbons, really, from Buffalo Trace. We got Amy Presk, who handles PR at Buffalo Trace. She wrote an email that says, quote, "We use a lower distillation and entry proof, which contributes to the soft, round, almost creamy taste and mouthfeel of the whiskey." That's about as much as you're going to get from Buffalo Trace about how they do things. Although Buffalo Trace refuses to release the specifics of the mash bill, we know for a fact that their wheated mash bill is used for all their wheaters, okay? Exceptions being CYPB and Van Winkle Rye. Obviously, that's a rye, not a wheater. That means Weller 12 is the same mash bill, age, and proof as the Van Winkle Lot B. In fact, Buffalo Trace has said the difference between the two is simply that the Van Winkle family selects barrels to be included in Van Winkle Lot B, while Buffalo Trace tasters select the barrels for Weller 12. That's it, guys. So we're going to now taste these and see if we can't compare one another and see which is better. So I'll go ahead and bring these out, set these aside right here. Try to keep these maybe a bit in frame, and I'll pull these. We got 1, and we got 2. Oh gosh, they're both full of something good. I know that for much, so I don't want to spill them. But try to keep them in frame, and we'll go ahead and start out by tasting, how about the left glass? So it does have a 90 proof nose on it. A lot of classic vanillas. Really not a lot, and definitely no ethanol, nothing like that, nothing astringent. It's just a really smooth, smelling kind of bourbon. Nosing's not my specialty. I'm more of a tasting kind of guy. So let's get into that. So this one's very light bodied. It opens with vanilla and cinnamon. Maybe some butterscotch on there. Let's go ahead and I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to go straight over this one because I just want to see what that versus this is. I'm going to get a quick rinse. This one looks a little darker. So, I mean, it's 0.4 difference, right? So, regardless, they're not going to be that crazy. But doesn't this one look a bit darker? So we'll see which is which. But this is definitely a bit darker. This one has a much more flavorful nose. Like really rich, caramels. I get it actually like I'm smelling like a Hershey's chocolate bar. And some oak. This has got a great nose. Again, on the lighter, side of a nosing. This one was almost like, very absent altogether. But this one you can definitely smell some stuff. So let's go to the tasting part, like I seem to like the most. This one has a very nice sort of subtle, very subtle, mature type oak. It too has that same chocolatey type thing going on. You got the vanilla, you got the cinnamon for sure, but less of the cinnamon. You can tell these two are definitely akin to one another. But this one is a bit more richer, more fuller in some of the flavors. So let's go ahead, and I think, just right off the bat, I'm going to set these out of frame for a moment and just kind of bring these here. But I think right now, just off those first two sips, I think glass number 2 is probably my favorite over glass 1. Thus far, we have however much of this left to determine that. I mean, going back and forth. You've had, Weller 12, and you've had Pappy, any of the Pappy. You've had, obviously specifically Lot B. I'd love to hear from you and hear what you might have to say about it. So go ahead and chime in. Thanks, Keith Kasecki. Thanks for joining in. Sorry you had to go there, but maybe you'll get to watch it later. Let's see. This one does have those, like I said, the baked spot. There's a touch of tobacco on it as well. It's at the end. I was going to say astringent, but it's not. It's like a flavorful kind of thing. But there's definitely something going on there. This is definitely more complex. There's a mature oak, just like literally like 1%, like this one, like a salt and pepper, right into the barrel, if you could do that, to get a little bit of that age in there. So while they're both 12 years, the glass 2 is tasting maybe a year longer or something versus glass 1. So this one, again, it's just very simple. I do get a bit of a chocolate, and not like your cocoa. I get a lot of cocoa usually on stuff, but this one's more of that chocolate type thing. They're both kind of on the drier side. They both got baking spices. They both got vanilla. Those aren't very uncommon to bourbons, anyways. But the wheaters, at the low proof too, definitely have that softer profile, and that's very evident on both glasses. However, glass 1 has a little bit more of that subtleness that the glass 2 doesn't, and that is quite frankly is the reason why it's beating glass 1 right now. There's a touch of cherry, just subtly, which is something I do find to be, especially like Maker's Mark, another wheated bourbon. Very prominent note on those. And I don't know if that's something that's unique to wheat bourbons, but something I find quite a bit on them. So maybe this one's a bit more nuanced. This one actually has more balance to it because of how simple it is, and I don't mean simple in a bad way, by no way, shape, or form. But this one is more nuanced, and because of that, maybe a bit less of the balance aspect. I'm still beating Glass 2, still beating it. I'm gonna go one more round here, and I want to make sure I'm absolutely certain that Glass 1, isn't the winner. Glass 2 is the winner. We'll find out. All right, so back to it. We're going to start fresh with Glass 1. Yeah. It's definitely a more balanced. Glass 1's more balanced. But it's just so light. It needs more. They're both great bourbons. In fact, I'm probably going to rate both of these at a 4. And that sounds really not great, considering that when one of these is definitely Van Winkle 12-year, which is something that usually you'll see in the secondary market go over $1,000 easy day. At a 4, no way. I'm not paying that anyways. But at a 4, definitely not. And now I've had all the Pappies. I've had the OFC, and I got to say that I'm a big fan of Pappy 20 and 23 and the OFC. 15, kind of run of the mill stuff too, I thought. But really that 20 and 23 year. But I don't know if that's Pappy 20 and 23 being awesome Pappy 2023, or the fact that I personally just love old age on my bourbons, because I've had other stuff 25 years and things of that, 23 years, and I really enjoy them. So I don't know if that means I like just old bourbons or that's why those stood out, but I do know that the 2023 are my personal choice when it comes to if I got to pay a lot of money for something, I'm going to go for those versus on the lower end of that old Rip Van Winkle line. But again, Weller 12 is something that's been, if I could afford it, or I could find it, it would be a daily for me. All right, so Glass 2. Nice smoky oak on this. This is exciting. This might get a 4 or 5. As I sip it, I get more nuanced notes to it. I get like the smoky matureness. I get some, like I said, a chocolate here. It's a splash of cherry. Just like imagine like a black. You close your eyes and like a splash of red, a splash of white, just like a pop here, pop there of some flavor notes that are just fantastic, quite frankly. So I'm going to go ahead and call it. I like Glass 2 better. I think they're really on the same level. And, really the so what is, are they the same? Can you buy whatever's under Glass 1 and be happy? If this is Old Rip, or, if this is Weller 12, or if this is Old Rip, or whatever. You get what I'm saying. Lot B, 12-year. Could you substitute one for the other? Whatever's on Glass 2 is definitely better. But if it's the Lot B, I'm still not paying that price for it. And even at MSRP compared to this guy, which is, like the $40 range, whatever, absolutely. Like, they are so close. They're like a 0.5. In fact, because of that, I'm going to go ahead and have to do this. I'll say that the Glass 1's a 4.0. This is a 4.5. Now, it's probably more in the 0.25 margin type side of the house, but I don't have that, so I'm going to bump them up just for the sake of understanding where they fit with one another. They're really maximum 0.5 of one another. They do taste very similar. A lot of similar things going on for sure. Glass 2's a touch better. So we'll see if this is a Van Winkle Weller 12 store pick. So Glass 1 is Weller 12. So what does that leave this one? Oh, I wonder what it is. Lot B. Well, it tastes like a Weller 12 store pick. That's what it tastes like. Maybe a bit more complex. It's obviously a bit darker. a little heartier. You know, it's 0.4 proof difference, so really it shouldn't have stood out that much. But this is definitely clearly the winner in my book. But again, not by a long shot. I think they're very comparable. However, I think, you know, price accessibility is something that I usually try not to factor in. I just talk about the quality of the bourbon, you know, in and of itself. But here you can't not talk about that. And so I'm going to have to say glass one, for the comparison against one another, you should really pick this over that at the price and value and accessibility. However, you know, all that, you know, agnostic to all that, I'm going to go glass two, easy day, lot B. So take that for whatever it's worth. You know, I hope you can get them all, and I hope you can try, you know, what I was able to do and make a decision for yourself. If not, you know, thanks for joining in. You can take my word for it. And if you're local, come check me out. Maybe I'll hook you up. But until then, guys, cheers for joining in. And I'm going to take one last sip of this guy. Yeah, it's just a better bourbon. Cheers.